Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd do another video for Dictember. It's a month-long celebration of detectives that Mark at uh, Book Time with Elvis are doing, and along with Michael K. Vaughan and Steve Donahue. And Mark has already talked about the Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Poe, published in um, 1841 in Graham's magazine, April 1841. Uh, but I thought I'd do a short video as well to talk about. It's sort of a companion piece to it. I won't go too much into the plot. I will leave Mark's a link to Mark's video below, and you can check that out. It's worth checking out if you're interested in Poe and or detective stories. I read it, or reread it, I should say, in the Selected Writings of Edgar Allan Poe, the Norton Critical Edition. It's edited by G.R. Thompson, and it has a nice little introduction that's just under a page long. And he talks about that a lot of times it's called, he says it's a misnomer, that it's not really the first. Well, I'll just read what it says here. It says, uh, the tale is sometimes mistakenly called the first detective story. There are many literary precedents for the method of Poe's philosophical detective. One of the earliest and most important is Voltaire's Zadig, or Destiny, 1748. Now, I've not read that, and I don't. If anybody has, they can maybe correct me on this if I'm wrong. But from what I can understand, the character's not a detective. He's not investigating a crime and then solving it. It's just that he's got deductive powers to figure things out, which is interesting because yeah, that's what Auguste Dupin, the detective, for in Poe's story. And there's two others as well: the Purloined Letter and the um, Mary Rouge, something I can't remember the full title of it, but there's three stories that Dupin shows up in. And he is very analytical, and but it's been shown as, like, the first story that really changed the kind of fiction that was out there. There were other detectives in a sense, but I don't think the word detective existed at the time for literature. So literature was dickless for dicks. There was no dicks in literature before this time, more or less. Um, and he sets out, like, as Mark mentioned, the first section, of first, I would say, page or so is a little daunting at times for the first reader, because he goes in and he takes three games: chess, drafts, and whist. And he talks about the strategy that's needed for each of these to be successful in these games. So for the first time reading, you go, what's going on here? But persevere with it, because it's what he's showing is the deductive powers that Auguste Dupin has, and so it does work. But he could have just used one. I agree, and it would have been just use chess, and I'm sure that would have been good enough. The editorial stuff in here, the notes, is kind of funny. Um, I think he puts a footnote for whist, but he doesn't put it for chess or drafts. And I'm sort of wondering, well, okay, chess maybe, but drafts? Why, if whist is, then why not drafts? It's an interesting choice of what he footnotes and what he doesn't footnote in here. Um, and it starts out with a quote by Sir Thomas Browne, who is it's from the Hydro Ropia. Oh, geez, I can't read the or Urn Burial, an essay by Sir Thomas Browne. He lived from 1605 to 1685. It refers to the difficult question the emperor puts to scholars: questions that are not totally beyond solution. So it fits for this. And the quote is, "What song the siren sang, or what name Achilles assumed when he hid himself among women, although puzzling questions are not beyond all conjecture." And that's basically the thrust of the story, that, something may seem impossible, but with deductive powers, like Auguste Dupin, you can figure it out. And as Mark said, rightly so, I think, and many others have said that this is sort of the prototype for, Sherlock Holmes and so many other detectives that came before. There's things like, being eccentric, staying up at night, reading and having a friend, and especially the fact that his the person telling the story is very much like Dr. Watson. So there's many direct parallels there, but there's always, in a lot of these stories, there's always a companion, a partner that is not on the same level of deductive powers as the detective, the star of the story. And it's a bit of a foil at times to lead readers maybe on a bit of a, down the garden path, or a few switchbacks. But mainly it's for the character to, or that character to ask questions at times, to make things clearer, or ask, well, how did you know that, Holmes? How did you know that, Auguste? That type of thing. And then you get the elicitation back. Sometimes it can be obviously, contrived, but, with a good writer, it's nice and smooth, and it's natural. Also, too, is basically the police are a bit inept. That shows up a lot throughout, these kind of things. And it's even like, I read Nick Carter, the first Nick Carter story, and there's similarities there as well, like especially the deductive abilities, and then as going on with Sherlock Holmes. However, at that time, he didn't have a partner to there's no partner to explain things, so the narrator was doing that as he went along. But there was never a lot of, exposition regarding how we figured this out, by looking at, scratches here, or, scuff marks there, or, the position of something, and so forth. That's very Auguste Dupin and Sherlock Holmes. However, saying that, it's clear that Nick Carter was able to do that in the first story, because when he surveyed and looked at and examined the murder scene of his father, he was able to explain to the police chief that what had happened. But this time too, like when this was written in 1841, there weren't a whole lot of actual real detectives around. Around the time, I think, in the United States, the Pinkerton Agency had started, and for maybe a few decades, in there was the Bow Street Runners, like a police force that was starting in London, and in France there was as well, predating this, and he mentions Vauquin, or I don't know, I can't pronounce the guy's name, but he's a police chief that started things, and it's referenced in here as that he had amazing deductive powers as well. So it is like, regardless of not being the first or being the first, it doesn't really matter. It's a cracking good story. It's just as simple as that. And the others are great as well. The Purloined Letter is sort of, it's this one and the Purloined Letter that sort of are down in history, and I like Mark, I'm not going to spoil the outcome of the murders in the Rue Morgue, but in some ways, It's as if Poe, I think, was playing with the reader to a certain extent. It's like, there was enough information there to maybe make guesses at what happened, but were you gonna, he sort of pulls out this out of his hat at the last second of what the actual, who the perpetrator um, is a little OTT in some ways, but also too it does set up the precedence of how a lot of the stories are with the reveal at the end. So yeah, it is a great story, and it is by a fabulous writer. Today, I think people have to just um, chill out and go with the flow of Poe's writing style, where it's a bit, heavy at times. And what he does, there's a reason for everything he does. And even if it seems convoluted, there's a reason there for it. And once you're finished, you will see that reason. And it's usually chock full of other references to other things that were going on at the time, which is not going to affect the understanding of the story. But if you get a good sort of almost annotated edition, or with notes, it just enhances it. It's like, oh, that's what he's referring to. And I warn you, that can take you down rabbit holes. So one thing leads to another. It's fair warning, I'm not responsible for any rabbit holes that you might go down. Anyway, I'll be back, I'm sure, with something else. I'm behind in my reading period, and I'm behind definitely on Dictember, but hopefully I will get back shortly.